Hi. It's so nice to see everyone again virtually. You're on season 3 of Music and Chat with Shueh-li Ong, and it's a good morning from me to you in Singapore. Please say hi in the live chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. Don't be backward and coming forward. Where's everybody? I saw plenty of virtual bodies before when my guest and I were doing a pre-show Skype test. Come say hello in the live chat right here, and remember to put any questions you may have in the same live chat, and we shall address them as the stream moves along. It's 9:33 a.m. in Singapore right now, so that would be 9:33 p.m. on Eastern Time and 6:33 p.m. Pacific Time. So, news from the island of Singapore, or SG for short. We dropped from phase 3 back down to phase 2 of what is known as heightened alert measures. And this means that students are being taught remotely, and F&B outlets cater only to takeouts. Very sad. But my family and I are doing well. We're keeping safe. We are keeping occupied. And it's been good having family at least to spend time with. All right, let's see. Hi, Val. So we have Val from Philadelphia. So good to see you, Val. And of course, our ambassador for music and chat, Gary Mayulo from Frederick, Maryland. Who else is out there? Don't be shy. Come and say hello in the live chat. Okay, I am sure you will gather your courage and type in the live chat with your name so that I may say hi and we can have what I usually like to think is a hearty party. Okay, without further ado, I want to perform some music for you, and it's the song Lover's Tears from my second album, which you can find on my Bandcamp store, shueh-li-ong.bandcamp.com. I want to thank those who have already bought my music. Your support has meant a lot to me. So let me play you Lover's Tears. So that was Lover's Tears from my second album, Music from Another Land. We have a fairly sunny day today. We had a lot of rain, fairly torrential for a few days, but things have cleared up some. So that's good. We get to at least peer out the window and get some vitamin D. Who else is here today? Hi, Mike Flavin. Hey, Mike. He says, I'm surrounded by drummers. I guess then you create a good beat together. RR. Okie dokie, let's move on. You wouldn't believe, and I guess you already believe, that's why you're here, but I shall continue with what I want to say. Our guest today has gotten entangled in so many different ways. I'll let him tell you all about his work and how his involvement and his entanglement and the things that he has done has created some most interesting products. I want to welcome Mike Brunt, my good friend, Mike Brunt. So I'm going to Skype him. Let's see, let's get my Skype screen up and let's call Mike Brunt.
I need some video, I think.
There we are. Let me just plonk you there next to me on my screen. Perfect.
Okay.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
So, Mike, you're primarily known as a specialist in web infrastructure and ColdFusion markup language, also known as CFML. And we want to know more about what that means. But you did not always work in network engineering. Tell us a bit about how you got involved in this industry and your move from England to the States, please.
It's all sort of wrapped together. So I was working for British Leyland in England, which was a company that at that time was owned by the government because it got into financial troubles. And I did sort of work a little bit in technology there. I was helping with helping anyway with the rollout of a Unix-based distributor communication channel. Cool, a little bit corny, but in those days it sounded cool. It was computer action terminals, which they shortened to CAT terminals. Oh. So anyway, through that I met somebody from Cummins Diesel in the United States, and he just put a bug in my ear. He said, we've got this problem with excess parts stock. So I'll make this as succinct as possible. I started looking at how to help them just on my own initiative, really. And at that time, the web really wasn't, I'm talking 1993, here, 1993, 94, the web wasn't really, it was just nascent at that time. The big thing in those days, although it was the end of it, was bulletin boards. Mm. And I went to a bulletin board conference and tried to find something that could help Cummins, and didn't find anything. But I met this group of people who were in a bar, interestingly enough. As you know, I drink beer now and again. So, you know, we got talking, and they mentioned this thing called the World Wide Web. I'd never heard about it before, but then I thought what they told me is, if somebody allows other people to look at files on their systems, that's what the World Wide Web is basically. I mean, it morphed into servers and things, but it's allowing people to look at files on your system, whatever they are, and do something with them. And HTML, of course, you know, Tim Berners-Lee, also Tim Berners-Lee, and using HTML and extending it. And again, I don't want to go on too long about this. HTML, if we go back in time, if you think about the text world, if you were looking at a help file and it had an underlined link in it to another part of that file or another file, that's HTML, that's hypertext markup language. So Tim Berners-Lee took that and made it distributed across, literally across the world. So HTML was the first big thing. Then images started to be pulled into that. Everything was textual at first, but then what the ColdFusion markup language did, which was completely revolutionary, it allowed databases to be queried via a web page. I mean, that single change took the web from being a static medium of you having to update files manually to back ends of databases updating files. I shan't go on too much about that.
It's good that you brought that up because we do want to chat about that. So for those not in the know, Mike's kind of given us a little summary of what ColdFusion markup language is. But for those not in the know, it's a scripting language for web development that runs on, correct me if I'm wrong or right, Mike. It runs on the Java virtual machine, the .NET framework, and the Google App Engine. That's what I dug up.
All those things. That's another thing about ColdFusion. So there's two main paradigms in software, in human software development. We'll get to AI later, won't we?
Yes.
One is this is web. I'm talking web environments now. Yes. One is tag-based languages like XML. ColdFusion in its original state was tag-based. So what tag-based is, you've got a beginning and an ending tag.
Yes.
And inside that, things happen.
Right.
Then scripting languages started to become much more popular, and it's still the same thing, but it's in a different. If you look at it, it looks different. So one of the first unique things about ColdFusion is it runs both in a tag-based world still and a scripted world. Its biggest, it's really sad in many ways. Its biggest problem is it's been around so bloody long. It's been around since 1995.
Wow. Yeah. And so I see here it was created by Allaire Corporation, or however you pronounce it.
Yeah, Allaire. That's exactly right. It was two brothers from out of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Wow.
They had this idea, and they ended up looking at two places to relocate. One was San Francisco or the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. The other was Massachusetts. Both areas were sort of hotbeds of technology. As it happens, the Bay Area became more prominent. And I'm sorry, my beard's going nuts. The sun's shining on it. I was trying to figure out: are we moving around the sun, or is the sun rotating? Anyway, all those things.
I hear you. I was wondering that too.
Yeah, so I can't state this much more strongly. The Allaire brothers were absolutely, revolutionary in what they were doing, and they still are. They're still involved in. To give some examples, there were two brothers. One was called J.J. Allaire, and the other was called Jeremy Allaire. And J.J. Allaire went on to create LiveWriter for Microsoft, which is the blogging. And Jeremy Allaire is running a grouping called Circle. They're very much involved in cryptocurrencies, and USDC, which is one of the stable coins, is part of that grouping. So they're still very much involved. They were visionaries, and they still are.
So most of us have dabbled in HTML. I have. And we all know that, as Mike kind of explained, that it's a standard markup language for, they say, if you have documents or, text that you want to display on the web and you want that hyperlinked via, code behind it. So when you click on it, it can take you to another document, for example. No fancy animations, but CFML is what augments the HTML files to produce those web applications you're talking about. So how useful is CFML to us, or does it only take, or do certain clients require CFML or must have CFML? Because I know you've dealt with some kind of larger entities, hospitals and banks and folks like those.
Well, NASA and the FAA and eBay and so many. I've had so many clients over these years.
Why can't they subsist on HTML alone? What does
Because
CFML
oh,
give
sorry.
them? Yeah, go on.
I get enthusiastic, just like my beer. So yeah, I mean, so HTML is a static. If you look at it, it's tag based, like I tried to describe. So you have an opening tag and a closing tag. That's an aside though. All software to this day is, and we talk about AI later, but all software to this day is just text. I mean, if you open, I'll give you an example. You may look at a web page somewhere, and it's, I'm going to be very basic. It's maybe this long and this wide. You open what the code that's behind that's producing it. You've got a lot of bloody code, That's why, and I don't want to preempt this thing here, but all software coding is incredibly textual. So, it's lines of text. And what ColdFusion did is it allowed that text to be created by databases on the back end, accepting variables that change. So the code was changing as we speak, not without, even though it wasn't AI, without human intervention, the database was changing the code. Really basic stuff like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, like
I like the way
news,
when we last talked about this, and you explaining how CFML is pre-compiled language versus Java, which is compiled script, and it made sense to me because, as you're saying, so the CFML is dynamically responding to the database that's changing, whereas the JavaScript, once it's done, you got to go and redo it for it to work differently or display differently.
Yeah.
Am I right to say that?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So just a quick, again, I'm not trying to go on too long with any of these things, but so we had HTML that was static. Then we had, and then quickly following ColdFusion or CFML was PHP, which is really, and I'll talk about this a little bit deeper or a little bit, anyway, PHP's been completely revolutionary. And the difference, the PHP was really inspired by ColdFusion, by CFML. The big difference, and it's still there to this day, PHP is open source. So and it's maintained by many developers around the world. ColdFusion now is owned by Adobe, and it's proprietary, and you have to buy a license to use it. So that's been, it's interesting. I've watched that play out, and I'll talk about something else in that regard in a little bit. But yeah, so just another couple of really important, well, three of them really important language extensions that have happened. So the first was really JavaScript, and I have to make a distinction here. JavaScript and Java are completely, they're not even related in hardly any way.
Okay.
Java is typically a back-end language, so it runs on the server. JavaScript is a front-end language that runs in the browser. What JavaScript did was allow dynamic changes to happen from the client side without any reference from the back end. So things like calendars and things that you can that are dynamic, but they're at the front end. And then you had CSS, which is, if I'm going on too much about technology here, Shueh-li.
No, not at all. I think it's good to lay the foundation.
Okay, so JavaScript allowed the front end code to be dynamic in just the same way that ColdFusion allowed the back-end code to be dynamic via databases. Then you have something called cascading style sheets, or CSS. And really, I don't know whether anybody listening's had this happen to them, but you'll suddenly go to a website and all you see is a load of text pegged to the left-hand side of the page, pegged. That's a failure of CSS, because what CSS does, cascading style sheets, it takes text, it's all text, at the end of the day, and it styles it so it looks presentable. And sometimes style sheets fail, and I'll repeat myself here. That's when you go to a website and you see just a load of text on the left hand stuck to the left-hand side of the page.
Got
That
it.
means that, now the last of the three, so we've got JavaScript, cascading style sheets, and then there's something called JSON.
I
And
haven't used
JSON
that
is,
one, I don't think. I remember using CSS. So you're saying they're like drop-down menus then?
well, CSS is, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
classic for CSS.
So it's kind of packs the information and it allows you to then unpack the information as and when the user needs to access it. So it
Yeah,
makes it
and
neat and tidy.
exactly, but that also bleeds a little bit from JavaScript, because before CSS, JavaScript was doing that. Um, there was been lots of different libraries of JavaScript over the years. The last thing, JSON, is more like a front-end database
Okay.
construct. So it's they all work together, and there's other things, but those are the main three enhancers. So you've got ColdFusion, PHP, and you mentioned it, I think, when you were talking, ASP, which is Microsoft. So those technologies are typically back end, and they allow dynamism, basically dynamic responses in web pages. And it is really good fodder, we could say, because when we get into Todd Rundgren, and we will do in Patronet, he chose a completely different paradigm, which we can talk about when we get there.
Yes, and it's interesting that you dug up all that foundational stuff, because it brought to mind also, how I worked in the multimedia industry in the late
Yeah.
90s, mid to late 90s, and it was very new, the platform, and e-commerce was testing us a lot, and we were testing e-commerce a lot. And I remember my team and I building an IPO presentation and their website as well, and we did use my project leader, of course, because I wasn't the coder. We used JavaScript a lot to pretty up their website.
Yeah. Right, exactly. JavaScript was the first of those front-end languages that I mentioned. Yeah. And eventually, you're going to talk about Macromedia, I know, but I think it's really important to talk about Flash at some
Yes,
time, whenever it's the right
in
time.
fact, we're gonna go right into that. So, as I said, Alaire Corporation created CFML. It was acquired by Macromedia in 2001.
Right.
It was named Macromedia ColdFusion, at least the scripting language, if I may call it that. And you
Yeah.
worked with Alaire from 99 through to 2001, am I right? So like
Yeah, I was
two or
exactly. I was
3
an
years.
employee. Yes, and what happened there? So just quickly again, I'm not trying to bore people to death with
No,
technology.
don't worry about that, Mike.
All right. So Alaire decided to create a consulting group. It was a business decision, and there were 36 of us that were recruited from various different backgrounds. At that time, I had been a developer, but my main background was networking and database administration. So when Macromedia took over, when they acquired Alaire, they decided eventually, maybe 6 months down the line, that they didn't want a consulting group anymore.
Oh,
So slowly but surely, we were all laid off. It went on over a period of probably 3 or 4 months.
wow.
And then one day I get this call from Ernst and Young, the accounting firm.
Yeah.
Right, and they said, we're trying to get support for ColdFusion, which they had a lot of, and we can't get any response from Macromedia. Can you help? So that caused me and a friend of mine who'd also been a consultant to create a company, because they couldn't deal with individuals for the policies. Ernst and Young, I'm talking about. So we created a company, and we did a lot of work for Ernst and Young, for a couple of years. So that was another phase of all of this. Macromedia deciding that they didn't want consultants, but there was still a need out there.
Interesting.
So yeah, so that was a good company to start with. I think either the second or third largest accounting firm in the world. So that's another client we had.
So, So you had your own company before you joined? No, I'm confused. But maybe because I was looking at my notes. So you created your own company. You founded your own company before you joined Macromedia.
No, what happened is that came after. I never, so just to
After.
put the record straight. So there's been 3 companies involved in the ownership and proliferation of ColdFusion.
Okay.
Alair were the creators. I was an employee there.
Yes.
Macromedia bought Alair, so for a short time I was an employee there. You know, maybe
Yeah.
for
Okay,
3 to
got
4
it.
months.
All right. Oh,
And
okay.
then after that, myself and another individual who had been in that
Oh,
consulting team formed
okay.
our own company. At that point, we weren't employees of
Oh,
Macromedia anymore,
all
or
right.
Adobe eventually.
Got it.
We were consultants
Okay, so
basically.
you're only there for a few months. So, because I
Yeah,
have some questions about that. So we all know, I'll give a little backstory about Macromedia and how they became such a big player in the multimedia market, I should say. Even
yeah,
though I didn't use it, because I'm a rebel at the best of times. When something is popular, I go the other way.
yeah.
I don't know why. Yeah, it's
Oh,
because
I
I'm a
can
rebel.
relate to that.
Oh, everyone's using it. I'll use something else.
Right, exactly.
So, Macromedia Director, for those of you who don't know, started off as Macromind Video Works in 1985. They were rebranded as Macromedia Director in '93. But anyway, Director was designed for the creation of interactive CD-ROMs, which was a very big thing in the '90s, thanks to the IT and multimedia boom. And it became the de facto tool for the industry, producing such games as the award-winning Journeyman Project and the critically acclaimed Total Distortion by Pop Rocket, which when I was working in the multimedia industry, we did spend some time looking at Total Distortion because, there was suddenly the ability to be able to create music-rich and, graphic-rich projects. And Mike and Mike, and some of my viewers know that I headed the development of a music edutainment game as well. So anyway, I have some pictures, Mike. So I'll show it to everybody now of the Journeyman project. Journeyman, actually. One man's project. Not men or people, but a man. So
Well, that,
I've got the cover of the game. Oh boy, it's so long since I've seen the word MPC or the acronym. We don't worry about MPCs anymore. Every computer is MPC compliant. And I have a picture of Total Distortion, the game cover, and I think screenshots from the game as well. Mike, you should be able to see it on your other device very soon,
right.
if not already.
Yeah, I'm looking.
So, reason why I brought this up is because we're going to continue talking about Macromedia's involvement in the IT industry or the multimedia hype. So, Shockwave Player, aka
Yeah,
Flash, a Macromedia construct, was for web-based multimedia. Director was for CD-ROM-based multimedia projects, but Flash, also known as Shockwave Player Flash, or Shockwave Flash, was designed for the web instead, and was released a few years later. Could you talk to us a bit about Flash? Because you've been, you've had a involvement in, or at least you know a lot about what it is and how it prospered and how it died quite quickly, unfortunately
yeah.
or fortunately.
Well, I think unfortunately, but I'm not. I never was a Flash developer, and I will I'm going on about things here, but I'll apologise for my beard flashing. So straight in front of me, there's a young sequoia tree which is about 70 feet tall, and the sun is setting through its branches. So it's rather beautiful to see. But anyway, to go back to Flash, yeah. So the web-based version of Flash was a virtual machine. And it's interesting because, as a coincidence, which it is, Java is a virtual machine too, or
I
has a
want to
virtual machine.
stop you there. For those of us who don't know what a virtual machine is, Mike, could you give us an explanation, a short one?
Yeah,
Thank you.
yes. So every application, every software application, until we get to quantum computing, which we we're getting there anyway. But anyway, every software application needs threads and memory to work. So to give you an idea what a thread is, in web terms, if you click a link or you just go to a website or click a link on a website, that creates a thread from your browser to whatever is at the back end, the server. And once you've got the web page back or whatever you requested, that thread is gone, the connection's gone. So backing all that up, which you need is memory, is computer memory. So a virtual machine is an encapsulated environment with those characteristics, which borrows memory and threads from the overall operating system. And the reason for that is that once the memory and threads have been granted to the virtual machine, everything goes on in the virtual machine. It's an encapsulated environment. And the reason, just talking about Flash for a minute, that's what made it so predictable. I mean, let's think about when Flash was around. It's a long time ago. And, it made it predictable in the browser. Because once Flash had the memory and the threads, it could do what it needed to do inside its virtual machine without relying on the browser. And Java works in exactly the same way, in a much sort of higher level, because Java runs across all sorts of things, not just the web. It's the same principle though. And there's a great phrase, or a phrase anyway, that came out when Java was introduced, and it's write once, run anywhere. The idea being you could write your code once and you could be confident that it would run on any environment. And what I mean by that is Apple, which because Apple native I'm talking to, and Apple changed a little bit later. Windows, Linux, Unix, etc. I mean, the virtual machine environment encapsulates, but there's challenges to that, and that's where a lot of what I've done comes in, because in the interchange between the native operating system and the virtual machine, there are challenges that can impact performance. Yeah. I hope I'm not going
Oh,
on
no,
too
that
long.
was good. So could you give us an example of that? Running on a native machine and a virtual machine impacting the performance.
Yeah, so basically what happens is in that interface between the native operating system and the virtual machine, there's a chance that threads don't get ready. So there's this concept in application development called a memory leak. And what a memory leak is, you've got 4 gigabytes of RAM, and you watch what's going on, and it keeps leaking. I mean, the amount keeps building up and never releasing. That's almost always because there's a problem with the thread. That interaction between wherever it may be from. I mean, I use the browser as an example, but it's not just browsers. So, it's very important that the threads are released quickly. So just to put that into a perspective, a thread problem will always create a memory leak. Always. There's no deviating from that. But a memory leak will not always create a thread problem. So watching what happens with threads is really, for anybody, me as a capacity planner, people as developers, they need to watch that very carefully. Threads blocking.
Thanks, that was very illuminating. So how long did Flash dominate the developers' use or development use before it kicked the bucket, and how did that happen?
Well, how it happened, I can tell you exactly how it happened, because I was at the conference, at the Adobe conference, when it was announced that they were going to stop, further development to Flash. And let's not fool ourselves, Flash is still out there and quite heavily used. It's just that Adobe aren't continuing development of it. I can't remember the year of that exactly. I should have probably researched that before this call, but or this conference. Anyway, the point is, I was at that conference, and there was complete shock in the audience. So, but the reason that it happened was Steve Jobs, because he perceived Flash as a threat to what he was trying to do. And the irony of that is Macromedia and Apple were really, in the early days, were really close. I mean, Flash at one point only ran on Apple. It didn't run on Windows. You go back far enough.
So what was Steve Jobs trying to do that where Flash could get in the way?
I think it was related to HTML5.
Oh.
And the fact that HTML5 wasn't proprietary. But the issue in it still exists to this day.
Yeah.
So you've got two sort of major things going on. One is the continued development of browsers, which is still going on, Firefox, and obviously, and Microsoft is trying to get back in Chrome. Now you've got Brave, which is a really interesting browser, and it's more of a privacy browser. So, but the point is, these are all different environments, and HTML5, in my opinion, is not anything like as predictable as Flash was. And the reason for that is that virtual machine, because Flash was inside the browser in its own environment, and there really is, in my opinion, I'm not a Flash fanatic, I'm not even a Flash developer, but there is no good reason that Flash was terminated in terms of ongoing development, because it was and still is to this day superior to HTML5 and the other things that revolve around that.
So yeah, it seems that Adobe dropped support last December.
Okay.
But do you think now we'll have public support of Flash? Literally, trying to keep it up and further develop it? Or do you think it will eventually kind of disappear really due to lack of support?
Yeah, I think I think it'll eventually disappear. There's another aspect to all of this which is pretty important. So this relates to Macromedia acquiring a layer. So Flash is in essence is a static language, it's pre-compiled. So you compile Flash and it does its thing. What the acquisition of a layer, and I'll just remind everybody that was the ColdFusion company. What Macromedia did, they brought the expertise of the layer engineers into the Flash world, and they created this product called Flex, F-L-E-X, and Flex was a dynamic version of Flash. So what Adobe had done, let me get that right. What a layer had done, they both begin with A, to HTML and made it dynamic. Macromedia was now making Flash dynamic, so you could pass in variables, and it wasn't just pre-compiling Flash and then getting it to run. And a lot of this, and we'll get to talking about a lot of this, it sort of definitely is relevant to what Todd Rundgren was trying to do. We'll get to that when it's the right time, but I've said that a couple of times. It's very relevant to that.
I was curious, whether Flash would ever live a long, quiet life, or whether it would just completely and utterly be dropped. Because, who knows? Any opinion on that? I don't have one. I just know that lack of support means it just vanishes.
Yeah,
completely.
So, there's another aspect to that. So eventually, Macromedia made a few decisions. Adobe made some more. So Macromedia decided that, that they didn't want to, as I've already said to you, didn't want to continue with Macromedia were not so Alaire were 100% server-side company. That was the world. There were other products they brought out, but they were all server-side. Macromedia was a tools company. So they weren't a server-side company, and I'm not trying to blame them at all. I mean, their ethos was in a different world, so they sort of began to drop some of the. They didn't drop ColdFusion to the credit, but they began to drop some of the other server side, or at least front end, back end mechanisms. Flex was one. Okay. So Flex, I'm repeating myself here. Flex was a way of dynamically creating Flash based on variables from the server. Which sometimes came from browser to server and back. So Macromedia decided to drop Flex. That I think was a big problem, because that was a fairly, I mean, if you think about combining, I mean, things have changed, I know now, but if you think about it back then, combining the graphical capability of Flash with a dynamic element, I mean, imagine that sort of impact on the gaming world, for instance, So that was a mistake, I think, that Macromedia made, and and then so we'll get back to director when the time's right, because that's an important part of all this.
Yes, I do have more questions about director, but let's move on to one of our favorite artists, Todd Rundren. He's a man of many talents, and we have many fans of his viewing right now. Todd's always pushing the envelope, because we know him to be doing it. He's still doing that. But in the 90s, he decided on an ambitious fan-powered project, which he released under his TR Interactive pseudonym. Right. And he called it Patronet or Patronet. What's the proper way of pronouncing it?
Depends on where you come from.
I know, right? I've been saying Patronet all this while, but...
Well, that's what I would call it too, or what I did call it. And he didn't throw me out, so I imagine he wasn't too displeased with that. That was a really interesting... So, Todd Rundgren, you mentioned a little while ago about... And this, these are motivations we have about not necessarily embracing, I mean, the coolness of things. I mean, I really, when somebody says to me that somebody's an influencer, it sort of makes my hair stand on end, which is a lot of hair. So, because it's sort of corny, it's corny to me, Yeah. But the thing, so Todd was trying to really push the envelope out. So you mentioned director. A director was very much, if you think about what it was a static environment. I mean, it was a DVD or a CD, sorry, in those days, with interactive capabilities. But you'd have to recreate the CD to change those capabilities to any meaningful extent. And Todd decided, I'm not saying he was wrong, he decided to use director as his mechanism. And we talked about it, several times. He didn't have a great feeling about the web, and he wanted to do something different. But I mean, it's like, and I'm not talking about Todd here. I'm talking about just a general thing. When there's this giant wave of things coming towards us, it's sometimes hard to swim against them. The problem with it, so the product that Todd created out of the director ecosystem was something called Interocitor, which I thought was a pretty cool name. But I should state this just for a minute. My part in that project was as a back-end person. I was helping with his servers, making sure that they were stable and they were capable of handling the traffic. But most of the time of the other volunteers, well, I'd say that, I don't know what the relationship was, but the people who are helping Todd, he's an inspiring person, so someone you feel like you want to help. So most of them were working on front-end stuff, because the environments, what the web did, slowly but surely to a greater or lesser extent, it made front-end experiences predictable across different operating systems, and it's not just different, it's not just Windows and Apple and Unix and Linux, it's all the different versions of them, Windows 95, Windows, NT, all these different things. So it was really difficult for the Interocitor, the front-end environment, to remain predictable on all these different environments. And a lot of time was spent supporting that, trying to make it work. I mean, in many ways, and I'd have to look at the dates and years and so on. Todd was ahead of the game with Patronet as far as what MySpace eventually tried to do, which is to connect artists with the fans. I mean, that was his goal, and it was inspiring. And he, as you said earlier on, he's a very, very unique human being. Very, almost, in my opinion, at genius potential. I mean, and I'll say something else in a minute. I mean, what is he? He's a composer, he's a musician, he's a producer, he's a technician. Sounds like somebody else who's on this conference tonight to me, but that's another story.
Well, I do have some pictures and some rambling on about Todd Rundgren. So this was, of course, I believe he used the director to create his TRI album No World Order, which was released in '93. This was prior to the unveiling of Patronet, of course. I believe, if I'm not wrong. And it consisted of, I've got some pictures here. So I've got the interactive CD cover. I've got an insert which tells you what the system requirements are. Boy, those were the days. And then a screen grab that I found somewhere online. So hard to find pictures of his TRI albums, but this shows you the controls on the game, I suppose you could call it.
Yeah.
And the aim of the game. So here's what it consisted. The album consisted of hundreds of seconds long snippets of music that I'll call cells, and they can be combined in various ways by the listener with interactive parameter controls, which you can see here, form, tempo, mood,
right.
And including pre-programmed mixes. Where's the mix by Rundren himself, Don West, Jerry Harrison, Hal Wilner, and our good friend Bob Clearmountain, who we had on recently, and who he actually mentioned this. So it's quite a nice connection there. And so with No World Order, the user could actually stitch these 4-bar musical cells together, and there are 933 of them, and select from these parameters to create their own piece. In a way, right. I see this as a high-level algorithmic compositional tool, because we'll talk about algorithms later. Well, and it was released on the Sony Philips CDI platform. And from what I read, it made history as the first interactive album. Someone out there might know this to be true or not, or that this information is contrary to the truth. So let me know if someone out there knows the real truth. But this is what I found. So let's see, what other pictures do I have? Oh yes, I have a screenshot of USA Today in '97. They wrote about Todd's TRI offering and the Patronet and what it was all about. Yeah. So since this live stream will be archived, if you want to read the entire article from the stream, you can go back and read it anytime. It'll be on my YouTube channel. Right. But it talks about it. And also I managed to find the Patronet website. Most of you have probably gone up there already, and it's under software revision and not accepting any memberships at this time. It's just this green thingy with lots of lines. And also I went to a fan-based website, an all about Rundren fan-based website, and it does give you a summary of Patronet. So thank you to this person. I should have got his name somewhere, but he also talks about the interocitor that Mike you mentioned. And there's information about it right there on this person's site, and it's called TR Connection. Thanks, Mike, for bringing it to my attention. Mike Brunt, that is. Because there's several
Yeah.
mics and the viewers.
Well, I've got one behind me in the corner, but it's a different kind of mic.
Oh, that's funny. I also have pictures. I got plenty of pictures, by the way. Our ambassador, music and chat ambassador Gary Mayulo, actually signed
Right.
up for to be a member of the Patronet service, believe it or not, and he did get his 2 enhanced CD package. So I managed to thank Gary at Mayulo for letting me use a couple of pictures. And as you can see, volume 1 and volume 2, I believe, of the package that he received. And volume 1 has the theme from Aliens in the Family, which I never watched. So I went to YouTube and I did find the one and only episode, I believe, for Aliens in the Family. It's a TV program about an alien in the family.
Well, that's funny. You know, it's really funny because I've been one of those since I was born.
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I shan't, in case it gets political. Yes, I know what you mean.
No, I'm not going to make it.
No, I was gonna say something and then I better not. we
Right.
love we love all our friends and all the people that we will meet in the future and all the people we've met in the past, and we're all grateful for these people in our lives. So that's how I'll say it. So
Yeah, definitely.
so Mike, Macromedia director.
Oh, God.
So let me get back to the other screen where I can see your face. Oh, good. The sun has quickly vanished behind the trees now. So
Slow, yeah.
so
Yeah.
so your face is not being spotlighted by the sun. So
Right.
yeah, you're gonna tell us about the use of Macromedia Director on Todd Rundgren's projects, particularly the Patronet, I believe.
Well, you know, looking at it, it made a lot of sense at the time because it was probably the most sophisticated, gaming type, interactive environment. But the issue was it wasn't designed. Todd was trying to use it this is the best way to put it, and this is not a criticism, by the way. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. But he was trying to use it think about this for a minute. You get a CD and you put it into the player and it plays. What Todd was trying to do was use that capability over a network,
Okay.
basically. And there's so much unpredictability in that. I've mentioned some of it. The operating system, the other end. I'll put it into a really. I'll give a quick example of an actual client that I had, and I
Okay.
can't say who the client was.
Yeah.
All I'll say is they were a big worldwide name.
Oh, good.
So they brought me on site. Are you still hearing me? Okay.
Yes. Are you hearing me okay?
Okay, good.
Okay.
So yes, there's just a little choppiness sometimes, and I don't know what's this end of that. But anyway, the point is, they brought me on site because they had this big application that they were trying to grow in terms of performance, and what they were doing is adding service to it
Okay.
to make it perform better. But as they added service to it, it performed worse.
Okay.
So they brought me in, and I never have been a plumber, but networking is like plumbing. It really is. So I was looking at this and I thought, this doesn't look right. Where's that coming from? Looking at IP addresses and this sort of stuff. And I persuaded one of their network engineers to let me into what they call a network closet, which is like it's like a closet, but it's full of networking equipment.
Oh,
And
a
I looked at what was
literal
happening,
physical network closet. A physical closet. you
Yeah,
mean?
they still
Okay.
exist.
Okay.
Yeah, where all the connections come
Yes.
in and then they all go out. So anyway, I looked at this and I thought I was looking at lights on what they call switches, which a switch is just a connector. wires coming in and wires going out. I'm looking at the lights on this, and I thought, this is weird. So I did some really. I said, would you mind if I'd made a little change here? And they said no. So what was going on? And I'll keep it short and sweet, but it's important. There's a concept in networking. This is computer networking I'm talking about here, called auto sensing.
Okay.
So you've got something over there that's one speed, and you've got something over there that's another speed, and they come into this switch, and the job of the software is to auto sense what the speed should be. And the problem was that all parts of that menagerie, or whatever you want to call it, were auto sensing. And because of that, they couldn't figure out what the actual speed should be, so they went down to the lowest speed.
Oh.
And I use that as a very quick example, and I think, hopefully me and other people figured that out, and it made when we made the change, they thought, they thought I was not anything good, but maybe some sort of devil who made it worse in the first place. But the point I'm making is, just quickly, is that Todd was dealing with all of that, but not just in a single closet, in a single company, across the whole bloody internet. Because Patronet wasn't just a US thing, it was worldwide. So to try and build something outside of technologies that were built to deal with that, I'm sorry, I'm going on here again.
No,
that was very difficult for him. And I don't. That's not a criticism. It's loading of his mindset, as it was, and I was privileged to meet him, of wanting to push the envelope, on all that he was doing, and that's what he'd always been doing, I think.
So if I'm going to ask some stupid questions, but it always helps because it fills in the blanks for the viewers, right? So the stupid question here is, if the Rector was aimed at interactive CD-ROM use projects that would end up being on a physical disk, why was it used on a website?
But it wasn't the web. I mean, that's a different matter. He was trying to use it. So that's a really good question, and I'll sort of answer that, I think. So the internet came before the web. The internet is the physical thing that everything's built on, and that was created by DARPANET in the United States, and that is another important point. The internet in the United States is, largely speaking, very different to the internet anywhere else from a structural standpoint. And the reason for that is DARPANET is the Defense Department of the United States, and their motivation in creating the internet was to create a network that couldn't be destroyed in the event of a nuclear attack. That was the motivation. So if, for instance, New York and the East Coast got nuclear, were attacked by nuclear weapons, the internet, the rest of it would still exist. So when you get politicians, if ever you hear politicians saying the internet needs a kill switch, have a good laugh, because it's impossible.
Got it.
Because the way the internet's built here is you've got different, they call them routes, or routes as we'd say in England. And it's like driving on a road. If you want to get from wherever you are, wherever you want to go to, there's usually different routes, and some are slower than others. But if the fastest one gets obliterated, you can go another way. You still get there. That's how the internet's built in the United States. In other countries, it really isn't, largely speaking.
How is it different?
China is a classic example.
Please go on.
Well, because it wasn't built with the same motivations. I mean, it was built here with the motivation. I mean, if you look at anything to do with the Pentagon, and this is not a political statement, they are very well funded. There's no other equivalent entity in the world. So the Pentagon had enough money to do what they needed to do, which was an incredible thing, because it's what gave us the internet. So, in other parts of the world, there wasn't that, a large amount of money to spend. I mean, and in China, a completely different sort of methodology, because they have these they have these giant firewalls, which control, internet traffic in and out of China. But not to say one more thing, the web, the World Wide Web, is a protocol that runs on the internet.
Got
You
it.
know, so, and you've got things like FTP, which is file transfer protocol, email, all these different things. They're all running on the internet. But you know, just to repeat myself, because it's important, if you ever hear politicians saying, US politicians saying, build a kill switch for the internet, they can't. It's impossible, literally.
There you go. That's interesting information. So, back to my question as to why Todd decided to use Director to build an internet presence. Why didn't he use something more suitable rather than a tool that was used that is specifically designed for CD-ROM applications? I'm just curious.
My opinion on that is, I'm sorry, Shirley, I interrupted.
Yeah, no, it's all right.
My opinion on that is there wasn't anything else, you know, in the web realm that could do for him what he wanted to do. You know, and you know, he was no, you know, I mean, as I've said already, he's a pretty, you know, brilliant man, both in terms of intelligence and in terms of integrity. And I think that, you know, that's what there was. Now, you know, I mentioned something that could have really, so I mentioned something that could really have helped him, but it was a few years down the line, and that was Flex. Because Flex could give him that capability to manipulate Flash over a network, which didn't exist at the time that Todd was trying to do what he's doing.
I hear you. I guess he had what you call it, I can't think of a word right now, but I can see that if he wanted something on the internet that resembled what he had been doing on his CD-ROMs at that particular time, there wasn't such a tool that could enable him to do that. I'm sometimes forgetting this was the 90s, and I do recall us trying to design a website for our computer game, and it was very difficult to be able to do that simply for all the, you know, visual and audio material that we wanted online. It wasn't as simple as we thought it could be. So yeah, sorry if I asked that question too many times in too many ways.
No. I think it's important that it's laid out there as to what, you know, because it made it very difficult. You know, I repeat this again. Patronet was, you know, certainly ahead of that phase of MySpace. So we should just touch on MySpace for a minute, which is another one of those sort of bygone words of things. I mean, you and I met because of MySpace for a start, but you know, I did some sort of side. It wasn't official work in the sense that I was helping their developers, but MySpace got sort of strangled by their own success. And that was a ColdFusion, you know, there was a couple of big ColdFusion clients in those days. MySpace was one, Toys R Us was another. Lots of stuff that you never saw. I mean, the US government, largely speaking, was pretty much all running on ColdFusion, but you didn't see that because it was behind closed doors.
Right.
So, you know, and there's an interesting sort of aside quickly about MySpace. What happened to them is, as I say, they were a victim of their own success. And this was during Macromedia times. There was some controversies about licensing that were difficult to deal with. And luckily, there was another entity that came into an open source version of ColdFusion, which allowed them to, you know, continue. But of course, you know, that eventually News Corporation bought MySpace at the wrong time, and you know, the rest is history, you could say. Having said that, I have no good idea as to why Facebook became so popular, but I use it a lot, so I can't say too much about it.
My friends are on Facebook, that's why I use it.
Yeah, me too, family.
So, did you ever see Todd get involved with the team, the development team at all? Or were you
not physically? I mean, I knew they were there, but not physically. But there was another, if I may, just quickly transition, I think, not transition, but just a little aside. So
Yes.
one of the great things about me helping Todd is I got to go backstage at
Ooh.
two or three, yeah, of his performances. So there was this concept, I think it was created by Alan Parsons, who had produced some of the Beatles' later material, and it was called A Walk Down Abbey Road.
Oh.
And there were two series of it, one in 2001 and one in 2002. So the 2001, I got to go backstage. It was in Anaheim in California, and there were some fairly, prominent musicians there. Obviously Todd himself. There was, I'm trying to remember this clearly. There was Christopher Cross. He was there. Alan Parsons, obviously. Bass player was John Entwistle, and that was the first time I realised how bloody incredible John Entwistle was.
Wow.
Because in the Who, he really got, apart from odd solos, he never really got known as what he was. He was a bloody amazing bass player, and I got to just have a few words with him. And then the next year, they did the tour again, and right before the tour, John Entwistle passed away. He passed away in Las Vegas, and they brought in the bloke who really, and I'm a bass player but not of any note, but the bloke who really inspired me back in the 60s, Jack Bruce. So Jack Bruce replaced John Entwistle in that second. This was 2002, and they were just amazing musicians. And then the other thing, and I'll finish on this note regarding that, I got to hear a demo of Todd Rundgren's performance of While My Guitar Gently Weeps.
Wow.
And I think the three greatest performances of that were the Beatles. Obviously, Eric Clapton was on lead guitar for that. There was, I can't remember what he named himself, it was something else. Then there was Todd's performance of it, which is great in a different. And then the one that really was amazing too in a different way again is Prince played it at one of the tributes to George Harrison after he passed away. And
Oh, yeah.
God, it's amazing to think all these people who aren't here anymore, all these bloody brilliant people,
I hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I guess we'll have a second of silence for these brilliant people who are not here anymore. So, viewer questions, if you have any, please put them in the live chat. You know what to do. You've been here before. And those of you who are watching and haven't said hello, please say hello. Oh, in that case, I'm going to say hi to Marcus Barnfield. Hi, Marcus, from Castlemaine, Australia, Victoria, my state.
Ah.
Thanks, Marcus, for saying hi in the live chat. So let's proceed. I have more pictures, and this time they are pictures from the non-exclusive release of One Long Year. So what happened, what Todd did with the songs from his first Patronet run was he released them in an album exclusive to his fans called One Long Year, but he also had a non-exclusive release. And our Music and Chat ambassador bought One Long Year, the non-exclusive one, and he did screen capture a couple of pics for us. Thank you. Or one picture I got from his submission. And he said, look, it says the executive produced by Patronet. So I said, I shall include that picture. Thank you, Gary. Not sure if you can see that. You will in a second. There we are. That's the back of the CD, I believe. And anyway, I also want to say that, as I've said earlier on, Todd is always pushing the envelope and has always been curious about the internet as a platform. And this time he recently, when was this? A few months ago, perhaps, if I'm not wrong, he used the internet as a platform to deliver live concerts, and he performed 25 from Chicago, it seems, broadcasting across America, each geared toward a different city with an 8 p.m. start time. I'm doing this because I'm quoting. And he called it his Clearly Human virtual tour. And I do have a picky of him on his stage in a semi-virtual type rendition. So he's still at it, folks. Todd Rundren fans.
Yeah.
And the image should be displayed very soon. And while you are admiring this image over there, I shall head on to algorithms. We talked about algorithms earlier on, or at least I mentioned the No World Order CD, where you can pick from various parameters to create your own music, but based on available cells that were put together by Rundren himself already. I consider that a high level, using the term high level in a computing sense, high level, not low level, so high level algorithmic compositional tool. So we've been composing with algorithms for decades now, and the drum machine is an obvious example. Another being generative compositional processes with synths. Arpeggiators come to mind. And how about an LFO with a sample and hold waveform controlling pitch? Another example. We've been doing this for decades. And but in 2019, Huawei and award-winning composer Lucas Cantor, this is what I found online, used AI to produce potential melodies for the third and fourth movements of Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. And I have a short clip from their promotional video, which I'd like to show, so hang on there. You should be able to see this within a few seconds.
To teach our smartphone to complete Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. First, we created an AI learning model. We use that to analyze the existing first and second movements of Schubert's symphony. The AI then created the melody for the third and fourth movements. We worked with Emmy Award-winning composer Lucas Cantor, whose role was to draw out the good ideas from the AI and fill in the gaps where necessary.
I think AI can only be helpful. It's like having a collaborator sitting right next to you who never gets tired, who never runs out of ideas, who never has an attitude of any kind. It just is there to work and it's there to help.
So while I'm waiting for the clip to finish, Lucas Cantor, Mike, you're probably still watching it. So Lucas Cantor, the composer and conductor, by the looks of it, he's conducting the orchestra at least. He said this about using AI, is that, now what were his words again? The one that kind of made me a little, it made my hair stand, speaking of hair, a little, was when he said the AI hasn't got an attitude, it's never tired. It doesn't have an attitude. What do you think?
Yeah, well...
Go on, Mike.
Oh, blimey. I mean, so we one of the people we've talked about, you and I, surely that is Ray Kurzweil, and I don't know his name should be pronounced right, but obviously musicians worldwide will be familiar with his creations in that realm. I would recommend reading, his books on the emergence of AI, and it's, to me, it's inevitable. So let's think about the situation we're in today. There has never been a greater demand for software. I mean, everything that we think about, even in countries that aren't so wealthy as we are, in the States, and Singapore's pretty wealthy too, they have smartphones. So that, the demand for software is monumental. And the reality is there just aren't enough developers. you know, and it's inevitable. And software, as I mentioned earlier, it's just text. And software, you know, text is much more repetitive. I should use another word there, repetitive text. That's much more accurately written by machines than human beings.
What
The
do you
classic
mean
SAD,
by
you
what do
know,
you mean by accurately written?
well, it's much easier to, you know, as again, for anybody that's been in the software world, I think they'll know what I'm talking about. If you, and I touched on this, if you look at what software is behind the scenes, it's just text, stylized text. Sometimes it's in, you know, this sort of shape. Sometimes it's in, it's just, and these things mean something to the interpreter of that text. It's much easier. It's much easier for software itself to write that software than for human beings, because human beings, we're a different mindset. We get bored, you know. We get another thing. We get adventurous. Oh, let's try this new, you know, thing that just came out and see what, you know, see what we can do with it. The thing about, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but the thing about, you know, a computer writing text is it's much more. It's going to be much more accurate. And I will cite probably the greatest software disaster of all times, and it was human induced, and that's the Boeing 737 Max. What happened to those two aircraft was completely related to badly written software that wasn't explained, badly written software by human beings that wasn't explained properly, for whatever the reason. So, you know, it's inevitable that I'm going to step back a minute and say this. The demand for software is increasing. I was looking at something today which is CPUs, you know, computer processing units built into flexible plastic, so they can be incorporated in whatever, you know, into fabrics, etc. But there aren't the human software developers. There aren't enough of them to write software to run on these things. There's something else called the Internet of Things, just, you know, which is a similar thing. You know, smart homes, Alexa, Google Home, all these things. They're demanding of software, and there just aren't enough human beings to write it. So it's inevitable, you know, artificial intelligence, or the continuing emergence of it is inevitable, largely speaking, mainly speaking for commercial reasons, but also for, you know, for experimental and ongoing reasons. So again, I'll recommend, if you read Ray Kurzweil's books, I mean, he predicts what's called artificial general intelligence by 2040. An artificial general intelligence is when, you know, machines or computerized devices achieve current human intelligence capabilities. Once we get there, there's no stop it. The only thing that can stop this happening, in my opinion, is catastrophic. I know it's going to sound really bad, but the only thing that can stop it is catastrophic climate change. If that gets that bad that we can't get there, but if everything keeps going roughly as it is now, we'll get to artificial general intelligence, and human beings at that point, their hands are off the controls. That's it. You know.
Go on, Mike.
I mean, those are my opinions from a software standpoint, because, you know, people will say to me, "Hang on a minute, all we need to do is unplug the servers." As we're standing here today, in more or less every country on Earth, software is controlling the power systems. You know, that's, you know, and lots of other things. So, you know, once, and I will, you know, again, these are opinions. I will say this though, from what I know of software, having been in this world for a lot of years, there is no malevolence in software. The malevolence is programmed into it by human beings. Once we remove human beings from the programming of software, there'll be no malevolence. There's no need for it. Why would something want to destroy some, you know, why would logic want to destroy something else for no reason. These are opinions, you know, and they're sort of controversial, but that seems obvious to me. And I say these things, and I will say this because it's important. I'm saying these things as a great grandfather who has an invested, you know, need for the future to be a better place for my family and their peers.
I hear you. There's certainly a lot of fear about AI, and there's a lot of fear about technology, really, in general, I noticed. But I wanted to go back for the viewers who may not understand or need a bit more background in AI. I'll just give you a little history, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. AI was coined by computer scientist John McCarthy in '56. And the term is popularly understood to be machines mimicking the problem-solving and decision-making capabilities of the human mind, e.g. facial recognition, speech recognition, even autonomous car driving, are such tasks known as narrow AI, because Mike expounded on general AI. General AI, as Mike said, is, you know, where the machines could actually understand or learn any intellectual task that a human being can. In fact, what I just quoted came from Ray Kurzweil that Mike mentioned, whom most of us in the viewing audience know as the founder of the Kurzweil music systems, and Bob Moog actually worked with him for 5 years as VP of New Product Research. I've owned a couple of Kurzweils, and I still consider them one of the more powerful synthesizers, so I'm all about Kurzweil synthesizers. Coincidentally, speaking of Kurzweil, I also have a picky of Ray Kurzweil, and his book that kind of is about what Mike was talking about as well, and his book is The Singularity is Near book. And he also, you know, he's been quoted throughout the years as saying certain things about his predictions about the singularity. And I got this one from the South by Southwest interview of 2017, and he predicted computers of human level intelligence by 2029. But it changes constantly. This was 2017. I also know that he thinks that we could live, you know, much longer lives than currently what we feel our lifespan is. You know, people, we see reports of people having lived past their hundreds, but Ray Kurzweil at some point started taking multitudes of vitamins and minerals to try and stay healthy so he could exhibit this longer lifespan, which is quite interesting to me. But I don't know if we did cover completely what the singularity is, but Mike, if you could humor us with a little summary about the singularity and what you think of the prediction and its impact, or, you know, if you want to expound more about it. And if you want to step away from the sun, you can as well, because it's coming. It's back on your. It won't let you be.
Exactly. Well, you know, we have to remember, you know, the sun is a miraculous thing. I mean, it's 93 million miles away. I will touch on, before I get into the singularity, on long life, and so you know, one of my it's not a pastime, it's a passion, and it's a vocation, is that I work in something called permaculture. Yeah. Which is basically putting, you know, growing food, but putting more back into the earth than we take out. That's a really very basic summary of it, and I won't sort of go evangelize about it, but I will say, as it relates to what Ray Kurzweil's saying, I every day I, and this will sound basic, I either eat something I've cooked, or I eat something that I've grown and then cook it. You saw a bit of that, Shueh-li, when you came out to, you know, to New Zealand, and you know, it's food. There's a saying. I mean, I remember it from the '60s, but it goes back way before that, which is "you are what you eat." I can't state that clearly enough. That's a great, for those of us who want, I want to live a little longer because I feel like I've got a lot to do that can help. But anyway, that's off the, I'm just relating to Ray Kurzweil talking about people living a long time and, what we intake and so on. But yeah, the singularity really to me is what I said earlier. It's when machines, computer systems, CPUs, collectively attain the good. I would say this, the good part of humanity. And we still have issues with human beings trying to. The fear about, I'll address this. The fear about AI is not a fear about AI, or it shouldn't be. It's a fear about what human beings can do with AI. But if we think about the logic of this, about this is going, we'll get to, again, unless we get disrupted, we only have to look at what's going on and what's gone on in technology, and all the different facets of it. It's consistently, getting more powerful. There are things that are interruptions that get hit. That, there's all sorts of different things in all of this, CPUs and so on. Oh, I do want to mention, so the singularity, I'll address that and finish that bit off, is when computer machine technology equates to human technology, but in the good way. The goodness, because there's a lot, I tell you, there's a lot of goodness in humanity. The majority of humanity is filled with goodness. It's just some bad actors that, sort of have taken us off. And that's not meant to be a political statement. But I will say one thing, going back to Todd Rundgren. If you think about what he was doing back then, what he was trying to do, and if you think about Trent Reznor as an example, not a little bit later on, they were trying to create things that could be valuable to their fans or other people that were unique. That there was only one copy of, or maybe 5 copies of. And that's, that brings us into something you probably want to talk about in a little while, which is what are known as NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, which is now that concept. But they were doing it years back, particularly Todd Rundgren. I mean, way before Trent Reznor, So yeah, I don't know whether, did I answer the singularity question adequately?
Yeah, anyone with a singularity question? I don't see one. But Val has one about software, which I'm not sure if you have used. I have, but I'll put it on the screen anyway. He wanted to know what you think about graphical software like Max 7 or Pure Data. I've used both, and I do enjoy them a lot. I think every tool has its own purpose, like. Such as if you look at furniture, I'll let Mike answer in a second if he has something, a response to that. But, if you look around in your home, there are different kinds of chairs, right? Just because there's no one particular chair and that's it, be all and end all of all chairs. There are different chairs for different functions. So likewise, I see different music compositional tools as fulfilling the requirements or the needs or the interest of the composer at particular time. And I've used both Max and Pure Data mainly for improvisational environments because I can let it go, and I don't have to fiddle it. Playing theremin, I need both hands, and I can jam with my friends. That's how I've used it. Mike, do you have any thoughts about algorithmic compositional tools such as Max and Pure Data, and if you've used them before?
I've never used either of them, but I can get to that. Yeah, I am a quasi musician. I mentioned playing bass, but I'm mainly nowadays. So I got released from my. So here's my problem as a musician. I'm not dexterous. Okay, so I can't play things quick enough. So I got introduced. I've not been in the Mac world much at all, so I'm mainly in the PC world. And I got introduced to Reason from Propellerhead, and that's a DAW that I've used. I mean, as much as I'm not a musician, I did a count on this the other day, and I've created about 1,400 and I don't know 1,450 pieces of music with Reason, and they had another version called Record, and Record was sort of a transition where they were allowing MIDI interfaces to interact. You could use instruments inside Reason, which you couldn't before. Mm-hmm. But the point is, let me get to the point of your question. The way I compose music. So let me go back another step, because this is something that's sort of silly, but it was really important to me. So I ended up in a blues band not that long ago, and it used to drive me bloody mad that we would play the same songs every week and replay the same songs every week. My mindset isn't like that. My mindset is whatever I'm doing, whether it be gardening, painting, writing, I want to be doing different stuff all the time. And for me, the way I compose with Reason, and it could be any DAW, is I start something and I let it play constantly, I let it loop constantly, and I hear things and I go back and put them in there. That's a bit of a different. But I've also used by adding things like reverb and echo and different altering mechanisms. Definitely, that to me is like algorithmic composing, because it sort of builds on itself. You know what I mean?
I have heard your stuff because I've visited you several times now, and you're precisely right. It sounds almost like Mike's work sounds like he could have been using pure data, and I wouldn't have known.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with it, but it's the same sort of principle,
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mike. We're heading. Mike, please.
No, just one last thing I want to say, because it's illustrative of my mindset in a different way.
Yes.
So I never liked the Beatles, and I'm old enough to have been around when they came famous, and then they never asked me to join because I lived in a place 30 miles down the road. But anyway, that's not the point. The thing that really turned me on to the Beatles was Tomorrow Never Knows, which was, I think, on Revolver. Because it was experimental, and that's I used to drive. I'll give you another quick example, which is sort of funny. My dad years ago bought a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and I would do all sorts of bloody things with it to make stuff what it shouldn't be. I would put the tape. I would sort of splice the tape backwards so it could play forwards and backwards. And my dad would come in and get really annoyed. But that's been my mindset, as far as music goes.
That's why you're my friend. I do have one last question, and it's from Val again. He's the one with a lot of questions because we're heading towards the end. It is 7 past 11 on my side, which means we're more than an hour and a half now. So I'm gonna move on to Ethereum, but let's answer Val's question first. Val wants to know whether you have any thoughts on machine learning.
Well, yeah, I mean, machine learning is a key part of AI. I mean, basically what that's doing is learning from things that already exist, learning from things that human beings, largely speaking, have created. There's some really wonderful things coming out of that. I mean, which again seem sort of people. I watched something the other day where it was a fairly serious operation. It might have been a heart bypass surgery, but it was done by a robot.
Wow.
And the surgeon, it was really weird to watch because the surgeons were sort of standing with the back looking at screens with the back to the robot that was doing the work, and it was much more precise, than human beings. I mean, some things were incredibly great, creativity but yeah, I'm going off at the tangent again. Machine learning is an incredibly important part of the whole AI trajectory, and of course the machine learning eventually will be machine learning from machines. We're getting there now.
It's interesting as we're talking about this, that even though I'm all for technology, there's a little bit of the Luddite in me that once in a while will say, oh no, machines, I don't want to have surgery done by a machine, and yet I know that I'm being stupid. or a little ridiculous, maybe I should say, not stupid. And I'm broadcasting this live, but I'm hoping to stir up some thoughts from our viewers. Anyone out there who's willing to say sometimes I'm torn between one and the other? Anybody? While you're thinking, I want to say hi to our friend from Sydney, Australia. Hi, Sam. How are you? Good to see you. Anyone out there? Mike?
Go on, sorry.
No.
I just wanted to say, as you know, sorry, were you going to say something? Well, I lived in New Zealand for the best part of 3 years, and that came about because of Australia. Because as I work in technology, I was asked 2 or 3 times to present at a couple of conferences in Sydney and then one in Melbourne. And on one of those flights, I decided to fly with Air New Zealand through Auckland, and I just was introduced to this amazing place called Waiheke Island. You visited, you know what that place was like. Yeah, I just wanted to relate to the people in Australia that I've spent time there. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Sam is Sam. Who I just mentioned from Sydney, Australia, works in cybersecurity, so he might have something to say. Anyway, let's move on to Ethereum. How many of you have heard of NFTs? Speaking of making money from one's creativity, if at all, or how many of you have dabbled in them already? Let us know. Sam also mentioned, Sam who works in cybersecurity, his area of work is in machine learning. So he said in the live chat.
Okay.
So there you go. Anything you want to tell us about what you do, Sam, in machine learning, let us know. Anyway, let's move on. So I'm going to do a little backstory on cryptocurrency and blockchain. So the idea of digitally notarized tokens of unique artwork has attracted many artists, especially with the promise that this platform would connect them directly with potential buyers. I would like that. If you put your artwork on the blockchain, you are said to have minted an NFT. I got a couple of pictures again. The first one is of a singer known as Grimes, who recently sold her artwork for $5.8 million. It looks like she sold it under 20 minutes. And then we have the Kings of Leon, who it seems will be the first band to release an album as an NFT. And they're selling it. I don't know if they're still selling it, but they were selling it for $59.29. And of course, news such as this fuels the imagination of artists hoping to hit the jackpot in the earnings department, which makes sense, as I was saying earlier on, in an era where most of our work is given away for free, because you can kind of extract it somehow. There are a lot of apps up there on the internet where you can key in a URL of where the media content is, and it will extract it for you, and voila, you now own the content without having to pay for it. So it sounds very attractive. In 2017, Mike, you joined Ethereum, which it seems to be the most actively used blockchain right now. Am I right in my description?
Yeah, so just a quick bit of history. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with Bitcoin. Bitcoin came out, I think, in 2009. And it's a really interesting thing because its stated intention was to replace the current financial systems. I would recommend anybody that's sort of mildly interested in technology read the Bitcoin white paper. Mm-hmm. It's not that long. It's about 12 pages. And one of the first things that they said is that in the Bitcoin system, if any third party is required, that invalidates Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin has been hijacked by basically Bitcoin's been hijacked by the financial systems, and it's become a speculation mechanism. It was never intended to be something that was worth $30,000 or 10 cents or any of those things. It was meant to be a way of people exchanging value between themselves without any third parties being involved. There's still an element of that in Bitcoin. Let's go forward to Ethereum. Ethereum really emerged in 2015 with a white paper, and they made what's called a fork, which is in software terms an altered version of something that already exists. It's a legal thing to do. So they made a fork of Bitcoin and created Ethereum. The big difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum was that Ethereum was purely a value exchange mechanism. Ethereum created the capability of writing applications on that platform. And that's when blockchain became known about. Blockchain had existed since the beginning of Bitcoin, but it's been seen as a separate construct. So repeating again there, Ethereum created the notion of creating applications written on blockchain, and they're known as dApps, distributed applications. The next thing that really, and this is where NFTs and Ethereum become linked. So Ethereum created the concept of tokens. And most of the NFTs that have been created at this point in time are using Ethereum and using their tokens. A token is like an asset. You could say, so it's not cash, but it's like, imagine, I mean, this is probably a very bad example, but I'll use it. A token is like a house. It has a value, but it's not cash in your hand. It's an asset that can be exchanged, and that's the concept of, as I'm saying, very, very broad brush description there. So at this point, most of the NFTs, sorry, go on.
No, you first.
Well, most of the NFTs are using Ethereum because of the fact that they've got this well-established token mechanism. And an NFT, non-fungible token. This is so. Bitcoin is not Bitcoin is a fungible token because it's something that's. God, this is hard for me to use the right words here. A non-fungible token is something that's a value. I just said it, I think, before. It's a value that's not cash in your hand. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it.
Okay.
And I'm not doing a very good job at that. But, the thing about the whole concept, which is, there's no doubt at this point in time, there's still a tremendous amount of hype around NFTs. But I want to go back and say, because I saw this happen growing up I haven't said this, but I'll say it because it's sort of relevant. As a teenager, I was a DJ for years in Britain, and I saw the emergence of the music industry. I mean, music industry, it's an oxymoron. It's an awful bloody concept. That to me is what injured musicians much more than anything else, or artists. The fact that these middle people, extract value from, and sometimes it's been really catastrophic. People who we think of as being famous never made a bloody penny of any note from what they did. That's the exploitation aspect of the music industry, or the way I met Todd Rundgren, incidentally, was through Sony Pictures in Los Angeles, because so it's not just music, it's all forms of art. These people who have leached off the talent of artists. What I see NFTs doing is bringing the possibility of artists. I mean, think about it, Shueh-li, and I'm not in any manner of the word famous. You've worked for bloody years with exceptionally. I mean, all your stuff you've done is exceptional, and I'm not just saying this now. You've heard me say it before. It's the truth. You've composed great music, you've produced it, you've performed live, and it's we need to get to a point where artists can be fairly compensated for the skills and all the rest of it. And I see NFTs eventually being a big part of that, because this is hard to describe again, and I won't go on after this, but it's important to know. There are constructs being built into the back end of software constructs being built into the back end of NFTs. And anybody that's on here tonight interested in technology, look up something called bonding curves.
Thanks,
Very
Mike.
important concept, and that's a way of keeping, and this is going to sound bad, but it's not meant to. It's a way of making sure that human beings can't game the system at the expense of other people. So it's a software construct, which means that people get theoretically, people get recompense or compensated, fairly, without human beings trying to get in there and unfairly extract value that they're not entitled to.
I like that. There are two questions, and I'm going to make these the last ones. But I also want to say hi to Brian. I forgot your last name, but hi anyway. Well, you go by the moniker Neon Brion, but I remember your name is Brian. So hi, Brian. So the first...
I remember Neon Brion.
Yeah. So the first of the two questions to come to the conclusion of this live stream, and I really have enjoyed having Mike on it. So much, I'd never imagined that there was so much we could talk about. But so my question is, you're talking about non-fungibles that is supported by Ethereum, but not Bitcoin.
Well, you asked a really good question there. Go on, carry on with your question.
I just want to establish that I got that right, because the question I have was proof of work versus proof of stake, which I think is very important. Yeah. So that was my question.
It is very important. Yeah. So a lot of people write and get frustrated about the power consumption of Bitcoin and Ethereum to a slightly lesser extent. The reason that that's the case is because of proof of work. So the whole concept of, again, I would recommend reading the Bitcoin white paper. The whole concept of this is that as Bitcoin evolves, it gets more difficult. It's all about cryptography and solving hashes. And as Bitcoin evolves, and the same would be the case for Ethereum and there's other mechanisms out there that use proof of work. It's becoming evident that, I don't think, this is a personal opinion, I don't think Satoshi Nakamoto ever realized what Bitcoin would become, how powerful it would become. And I think, and I'll say this because it relates directly to the work I do. The main part of the work I do is capacity planning. It's saying you now have, an example, 1,000 users, this is what you need. If you've got 100,000 users, you're going to need that. Most of the ecosystem of cryptocurrencies and blockchains, load testing is an afterthought at the best of times. It's not even really considered. So I think that Bitcoin and Ethereum got caught by their own issues. So let me just address proof of work and proof of stake, though.
Okay.
So proof of work says that the entity that's most likely to succeed in the solving of the cryptography, hashing and so on, is the one that applies the most work to it. So that means the more computing power you've got, the more likely you are to be successful and win Bitcoins. And think about it. Bitcoin, I think, is around about $30,000 at the moment. There's quite a bit of motivation to try and solve those algorithms, those cryptography. Let me use the right term.
So your
question.
So your work is recompensated by your earning from the work that you do. You earn cryptocurrency by the work,
Bitcoin,
by the mining work you do, Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's mining. Mining's not a bad. It's sort of a little overused, but it's not a bad.
Is that a better
if you think
word
about
to
mining as it is.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's a good word because if you think about mining as it is, the only difference is that the more you could say, let's use I don't know what the word is, an example. There's a
Okay.
better word than that. Let's say there was a gold seam that was the same all around the world. So it was the same depth, the same reward. The mining algorithm would be good for that because it would say the more mining machines you have, the more gold you're going to get. Because it's the same gold everywhere, but gold isn't like that. There's thick
Yes.
seams, there's thin seams.
Okay.
That's the sort of so in Bitcoin, it's like the gold seam is the same everywhere over the world, and the
Okay.
more machines you put into it, yeah.
Got it.
So proof of stake is slightly different. So in that case, the more stake you put into the system, so the more Ethereum you have. It doesn't apply to Bitcoin as such because Ethereum 2 is trying to move to proof of stake, and that says the more stake, the more value you have in the system, the more likely you are to be successful. So it's not
Okay.
the more machines you have, it's the more stake, the more value you've got in the system, the more likely you are to be successful.
So you have to then
That-
work
that makes sense?
so you have to work before you can get stake. Is that right?
Well, not necessarily. If you, for instance, if you went out and, this is where the whole system went off the rails a bit.
Yeah.
You can go out and buy Ethereum. You can buy Ethereum.
Right.
So if you bought
Yeah.
a lot of Ethereum, you'd have a lot of stake without the work aspect.
Okay.
And the reason it's taking a while to get to Ethereum 2 is because it affects the miners.
Yeah.
The people who are mining proof of work.
Yeah.
And they don't want to lose that advantage they've got. So there's another aspect coming about though, and this is really important for anybody that's interested to look into it. It's what's called the Bitcoin Lightning Network. So lightning as in lightning, and that's sort of they call it an off-chain being off blockchain, but it's really inspiring a lot of things to go on. One of the most relevant is that El Salvador recently accepted Bitcoin as a sovereign currency.
Wow.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and there's a lot of fervor, in the world, in the cryptocurrency Bitcoin world. And I will say one more thing, which I think is really important, and I touched on it earlier. There are not enough developers. There are not enough software developers for the amount of software out there. And one of the other sides of that coin, apart from AI, is that software developers have an immense amount of power. Software developers collectively have far more power than every government put together on Earth.
I'm in the wrong job.
And the reason for that is that everything runs on software.
Yeah.
And I think the best person I could recommend for anybody to listen to that wants to know more about that subject is Edward Snowden. He's a great inspiration for most software developers in the world, and I won't say any more than that because it sort of starts to get mildly political. It's not meant to, but just listen to Edward Snowden and what he's saying. It's
Thanks,
interesting.
Mike. So our friend Sam was saying that I don't know if he was quoting in Aussie dollars or US dollars, but he was saying that in fact the Bitcoin is worth 46,000 now.
Maybe. I mean,
or was it 40
I looked
cent?
at it maybe.
Yeah, Sam, can you tell us if that figure is in Aussie dollars? But Sam had a question to conclude this interview. Where did it go? Sam, I can't find it, but he wanted to know what you thought of Cardano, if that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, here it is.
Yeah, good.
Let me flash it out
Cardano,
here. What do
yeah.
you think of Cardano? It is not mined and created by scientists. And this will be the last question for the evening or morning, afternoon, wherever you are. Mike, what do you think of Cardano?
I think it's exciting. There's another one I would recommend looking into too, which is called Polkadot.
What do you think of the fact that it's not mined and it's created by scientists, quote unquote, Sam?
I think. Did you asking me that,
Yeah.
Shirley or Sam?
No, yeah, I'm asking you.
Yeah, I mean, these are logical progressions. If I go back in history a little bit, before the web, I explained that was a protocol running on the internet. There were several things around and about that came before the web. There was something called Archie. There was something called Gopher. And they were all sort of quasi versions of what the web became. I think that in the blockchain world, in the distributed ledger technology world, we're at that stage. There are several players that are certainly of great interest. Cardano's certainly one of them. But there's so much going on that I think if I had to characterize it into one, another thing I would recommend people looking into is something called IPFS, which stands for Interplanetary File System. That's becoming very, very prevalent. And a quick example of that, let's say there's two people at a conference in a room and they want to share a file. The current mechanisms, you have to upload it to something, whether it be FTP server or Dropbox or AWS S3. So you're sitting, maybe a row apart, and in order to share a file, you've got to send it up to, up to something to download it. IPFS cuts that step out. It allows you to share files, peer to peer. That's an important concept. I think as we're wrapping up, and I could go on for 2 years talking about this stuff. But the thing is, peer to peer is still a key technology. That's the ability underlying all of this, whatever it is. All these things we've talked about, the ability to share things directly without going through a third party. That's the future. And the days of things like Facebook, particularly in Google and so on, they'll have to evolve, or they won't survive. Long term.
Thanks, Mike. I'm just gonna look down and see if there are any other comments. Sam said the 47K was in Aussie dollars.
Okay.
And it seems that Sam and Gary had a chat about money they made through Bitcoin, profit and loss, and etc. But nothing else jumps up. I see.
Well, I would say, oh, sorry.
Go on, Mike.
There's a great song from Public Enemy, who I particularly liked over the years, and it's called "Don't Believe the Hype." and I would leave that, because let me tell you, the financial systems of the world are petrified about what's going on with things like Bitcoin. And another thing that's really important, because they're trying to, let them, and this is not a political statement, it's a financial one. Yes. Don't let central banks convince you that central bank digital currencies are equivalent to things like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Cardano. They're not. And there's a big reason, and it's this. Things like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Cardano and the others are worldwide. They can't be stopped. It's impossible. They can't be, and that's why. So you've got a lot of scrambling going on with central banks and governments about what they can do about it, and the answer is nothing.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I think sometime in the future we'll catch up with you again, I think. When I say future, you never know how fast things develop, but when there are more questions about AI and cryptocurrency and blockchain or what, any of these areas that we have covered, we'll have you back on again. So, thanks, Mike.
I value that. I've really enjoyed it.
I have a little mini applause for you.
Well, one of the great highlights of tonight is the machinations of my beard.
I know. So funny. But Mike, thanks again. We've totally and utterly enjoyed having you on the live stream, and I hope you
Absolutely.
had fun too.
It was brilliant.
We wish you exciting projects ahead, and of course to stay safe. And I'll touch base with you again soon, like we usually do on regular occasions. But I want to say thanks again from everybody. I see a lot of thank yous in the live chat, and I'll wish you well and good night. I think what time? Oh, not quite bedtime for you yet. Soon.
Not quite. 8:36.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right,
I'll catch
so
up with you
much,
soon.
okay?
Take care. Bye, Mike.
Yeah. Same to you and to everybody. Thank you.
Bye. So that was fascinating. Yes, it sure was. It's always fun talking to Mike. We catch up regularly, and we always expound on deep, meaningful stuff such as AIs and so on and so forth. But I also wanted to thank the respective owners of the media displayed today on the live stream for allowing us to use it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell icon for alerts to the next live stream. My music's also easily purchased on Bandcamp, and you may leave a tip if you like by scanning the QR code on the closing screen. Thanks everyone, you've been wonderful viewers. It's always good to see my friends online. I'll see you in a fortnight, and bring your friends too. Take care till then. Hold on, I have an awesome icon I want to display. You guys are awesome. Okay then, goodbye y'all. Stay safe. See you in 2 weeks. I'll be announcing the guest for the next episode very soon too. Just need to confirm them. Okay, take care y'all. Bye.